This paper is part of a project that tackles two themes which George Mosse explored in his work. The first is how modern nations display themselves, how they convey respectability and unity, how they make their political pleas seem legitimate and indeed unstoppable. The other theme is the different ways in which ideas of Germanness shaped the self-understanding of Germans, Jews and non-Jews. My research, however, pays closer attention to Jews outside Germany. I study the meanings that Jews in Central and Eastern Europe and Palestine attributed to the German language and to German's paradoxical place in the history of Jewish nationalism. The paradox begins with the fact that German played an indispensable role in the formulation and dissemination of Jewish nationalist ideas. For Jewish nationalists, German also served as a historical role model of a highly esteemed cultural language and a unifying national language in the history of Germany. On the other hand, some early Jewish nationalists associated German with historical currents that undermined the postulate of Jewish national unity. The acquisition and use of proper German were central to the ideologies of the German Jewish Enlightenment and later to religious reform movements. For many Jews, both observant and non-observant, these processes seem to enhance the assimilation of Jews, their withdrawal from Jewish self-understanding. German was associated then with liberal and assimilatory currents, but it was simultaneously a significant vehicle in the formation of Zionism. German was part of the problem Zionists sought to address, but also part of the solution. Precisely because it was a multifaceted object, a signifier onto which a variety of meanings could be inscribed, German serves as a useful prism to study Jewish nationalism and its driving tensions. So today I'll just touch briefly several of these problems. The first one is about what German meant in the more taken for granted sense as the lingua franca of Zionism, then the question of the profound multilingual character of the Zionist movement and how it figured, then the question of Hebrew and how it could be advanced and formulated when there is not enough manpower to speak it, or even the language itself cannot convey it. And what do we do with the relation between German and Yiddish? Each of these themes is, of course, vast and has multiple aspects to it, but here I'll just focus on how they manifest themselves in one specific venue, namely the Zionist Congress. German was the lingua franca of Zionism until the First World War. The movement's headquarters were located in Germany and Austria. Its main periodicals were printed in German, as so were the majority of its scholarly and political publications. Some of the main figures in Zionist politics, most famously Theodor Herzl and Max Nordau, were rooted in German culture and formulated their ideas of Jewish nationhood using the vocabulary and imagery of German nationalism. What is more, German centrality in the Congress tapped into the movement's effort to project respectability and belonging to the realm of international diplomacy. However, the political momentum that Zionism gained at the turn of the century drew to a large degree from popular agitation in Eastern Europe, where approaches to German among Zionist activists were more ambivalent. German was recognized as a pathway to scholarly knowledge and the key language of ideological debates, chiefly nationalism and socialism. Various Zionist activists acquired German in their youth or studied in German-speaking universities. For those who didn't, its proximity to Yiddish made it more accessible than other languages. But German was not a major aspect of their self-understanding. They belonged to a scattered collective of German-reading Jews who were active consumers of German literature and political debates and indeed took part in them, while often trying to separate between German's functionality and its symbolic meanings. In both formal and informal interactions taking place in the Zionist Congress, German was a language that united and divided German-speaking and German-reading Jews. It facilitated communication between delegates from across the Jewish diaspora, but it also brought to the surface ideological and cultural divisions in the movement. When the first Zionist Congress met in 1897 and in the following congresses, the participants were free to use any language they chose. The dominance of German, however, was evident, and it was manifested in the fact that until 1935, its protocols appeared exclusively in German. The transcribers of the protocols were German speakers and were unable to record other languages. Speeches were translated simultaneously into other languages by other delegates. Before the First World War, those who spoke in languages which the stenographers did not understand appeared in the protocols only through the words of those who translated them, and often paraphrased and abbreviated. In 1898, Bernard Lazare appealed to the participants to guarantee that the Congress protocols and publications are made accessible to those Jews, mostly of Sephardi descent, who don't understand German or Yiddish. Lazare himself spoke in French, and his participation in the discussion appeared only through Nordau's translation. Another delegate apologized for his poor German and admitted he would rather speak in Russian, quote, but certain misunderstandings emerge in the translation. Different from the speeches, the discussions were only occasionally translated simultaneously, and the transcription reflected the inferior status of languages that aren't German. The protocols from the Congress' first decade record various cases in which the comments made by non-German speakers do not appear in the protocol. In such cases, the protocol state, for instance, Delegate Zepp speaks in jargon, or Delegate Etigen speaks Russian. The 1898 protocol refers at one point to a French delegate who speaks in a manner that is unintelligible to the stenographers, as it's written. It was thus also in the printed version of the discussion that the linguistic order could marginalize participants who did not speak German. In the Congress Hall, one could hear German, Yiddish, Russian, and other languages, building up, as one participant called it, a Babel tower of languages in which many of our brethren cannot understand each other. The discomfort resulting from the need to translate the speeches held in various languages also touched on cultural divisions within the Jewish world. Russian Zionist Menachem Usishkin declined Herzl's request at the Congress of 1899 to speak in German, replying, I speak mainly to those who understand me and who wish to understand me. I want to speak in a manner which will allow my position to be properly understood, and this I can achieve only in Russian. A different approach was put forward by Aaron Marcus, a Hasidic Zionist rabbi from Krakow and descendant of a German Jewish family. He wrote in 1900 in his German language newspaper about the Babel-like confusion of the Congress. The root of this confusion, according to Marcus, lay in the modern assimilatory education and the damage that it had inflicted on the rightly famous Jewish linguistic genius, as he called it. He wondered bitterly how come a Levantine Talmudic Jew could speak 5 or 6 languages, whereas a Russian Jewish student, quote, does not understand a word of any other world language. Marcus's reproach of Jewish assimilatory currents was directed against Russian Jews, although these currents had been prevalent within the German-speaking realm as well, of course. Yet due to German status as a Weltsprache and its role in the Jewish world, it was not, in Marcus' eyes, part of the Zionist language problem. German centrality also played a role in quarrels between the proponents of a diplomatic approach and the grassroots approach to Zionist matters. In the Jewish political discourse of the period, the term Congress Zionism denoted Western European Zionists clinging to diplomatic channels and philanthropy. It was also frequently used derogatorily to highlight the ceremonialism of the Congress and its remoteness from the experience of the Jewish masses. In the 1903 Congress, Russian Zionist and future leader of the revisionist party, Vladimir Jabotinsky, gave a provocative speech in, quote, highly eloquent Russian, as he himself put it, and exceeded the limit of 15 minutes. In his autobiography, Jabotinsky quoted the words with which Herzl and his assistants requested him to get off the podium. Herzl told me, Ihre Zeit ist One of his assistants, Herr Friedman, told me in his native Prussian way, Gehen Sie herunter, sonst werden Sie heruntergeschleppt. According to historian Michael Stanislavski, Herzl was not present in the hall, and Herr Friedman was actually Herr Bodenheimer. The veracity of the incident is therefore questionable. Be that as it may, Jabotinsky's decision to speak in Russian seems to have aimed at disrupting the Germanphone atmosphere of the Congress, or at least this is how he hoped this incident would go down in history. In this manner, Jabotinsky sharpened the divide between the ideological world of the Prussian Zionists and its Russian counterparts. Germany's dominance in the Congress was also an inevitable but symbolically serious disruption of Zionism's Hebraist agenda. In the 1907 Congress, Nahum Sokolov, the movement's general secretary, issued a proposal to declare Hebrew as the movement and the Congress's official language. This included an instruction that the opening speech would be held only in Hebrew, while allowing other languages to be used later for pragmatic purposes. The proposal received negative responses. Belarusian delegate Shimshon Rosenbaum argued that Sokolov was in essence expecting Zionist leader Max Nordau to learn Hebrew within 2 years so well that he would be able to give his speech in Hebrew. In other words, we will not hear this speech. Another delegate, a Lithuanian rabbi, objected on theological grounds. He argued that as long as Judaism's diasporic condition persisted, Hebrew should not be the language of the Congress. The exile Congress must have an exile language, so that we keep awake our longing for Hebrew. Out of love for the Hebrew language, please decline Sokolov's proposal. According to this argument, using a foreign language such as German was not merely a communicative convenience, but indeed a spiritual necessity. David Wolfson, Herzl's successor as the president of the Zionist organization, stated that in its present form, Sokolov's suggestion would, quote, might make the Congress a laughingstock. Sokolov then proposed an amended version in which Hebrew's official status would be of symbolic importance only. The Congress approved this version, despite protests from several attendees. Wolfson proceeded to the next subject on the agenda as Max Bodenheimer, a German Zionist with no knowledge of Hebrew, interjected humorously, "In Hebrew, please." The next Congresses continued to be held predominantly in German. In the 1911 Congress, a Russian delegate began his speech by reproaching in Hebrew the Zionist delegates for the fact that the official endorsement of Hebrew remained on paper only. He then added, "Since I already see angry faces in the hall, I must now defy the rule as well," and turn to German. In a discussion on the languages used in Zionist meetings, German delegate Sami Gronemann proclaimed unapologetically that for the sake of proper debate that would be reflected fairly in the protocols, the participants should speak in German rather than Hebrew. Quote, "The Congress is not merely a demonstration. It deals with serious matters." His request was followed by both applause and protest. In the aftermath of the First World War and the Balfour Declaration, Zionist politics evinced a structural shift, as London became its imperial center of gravity. Moreover, the consolidation of the principle of national self-determination in European politics strengthened Zionist resolve to mobilize this rhetoric, predicated on shared ethnicity, territory, and language. Against this backdrop, not knowing Hebrew from the point of view of Zionists in Eastern Europe and Palestine had detrimental implications, as it impeded Jews' ability to demonstrate their national cohesiveness. The Zionist Congress witnessed in these years more vocal resentment over the language problem. In a speech given in German in the 1921 Congress, Jabotinsky asserted that he had intended not to say a single word in a language other than Hebrew, adding, "We will pay a heavy price for the fact that this Congress is linguistically foreign and hence acquires foreign characteristics." He explained that it is only because he seeks to attack certain participants who do not speak Hebrew that he turned to German. He added that he was hoping, quote, that this would be the last time. Jabotinsky's hope, however, had yet to materialize. A Hebrew periodical reported during the 1927 Congress that despite the fact that Hebrew, Yiddish, and English were accepted languages of speech, German remained, quote, the true owner of the Congress, unquote. At this point, however, we should ask what exactly we mean by German. Both participants and reporters frequently referred to the language of the Congress as Kongressdeutsch, a form of Yiddishized German, or perhaps Germanized Yiddish, which served as a surrogate language in the multilingual setting of the Congress. German Zionist Heinrich Löwe asserted that Kongressdeutsch was extremely close to Hochdeutsch. On the other hand, some historians asserted that Kongressdeutsch was essentially Yiddish, or a highly Germanized form of Yiddish invented by East European delegates. According to Yiddish scholar Nathan Ziskind, Kongressdeutsch was nothing but the recent manifestation of a longer phenomenon of Yiddish speakers attempting to speak in German, while in fact speaking Yiddish. By the same token, Yiddish linguist Judel Mark placed Kongressdeutsch within a longer tradition of attempts to refine Yiddish and to bring it closer to proper German. A Russian delegate recalled how his compatriots could not participate in the discussions in the Congress due to the language barrier. Only in the following years, after acquiring Kongressdeutsch, as he wrote, could they begin to engage in discussions. From this remark, it seems that Kongressdeutsch was indeed closer to German. Chaim Weizmann wrote that, quote, every Jew thought he knew German very well, but Herzl's German was not Kongressdeutsch, hence strengthening the view that Kongressdeutsch meant simple, unembellished German. According to a perceptive definition of an American Jewish journalist who attended the Congress and also a self-proclaimed speaker of Kongressdeutsch, it was neither German nor Yiddish, but a rather interesting conflict between the two. The different views indicate how, depending on the point of view of the speaker, Kongressdeutsch could mean German or Yiddish or both or none. It could serve as a means of communication and of miscommunication. For Yiddish speakers, Kongressdeutsch embodied the extent to which Yiddish could be modified so as to maximally approximate German. For German speakers, Kongressdeutsch embodied the extent to which German could be simplified so as to be comprehensible to Yiddish speakers. Kongressdeutsch was not a clear linguistic entity, but a discursive site of interaction between the speakers of these languages. It was the rise of the Third Reich that diminished Germans' eroding respectability in the Congress. In his opening speech in August 1933, Sokolov started by speaking in Hebrew, and then announcing that his next words would be in the preferred international language of politics, French. As German was heard less and less in the Congress sessions, it was not only Hebrew, but also Yiddish, which gained temporary legitimacy as an alternative to German. An American Yiddish periodical reporting from the Congress declared, Kongressdeutsch is no more, only Hebrew and Yiddish are spoken, adding that even those who used to speak Kongressdeutsch were now speaking Yiddish. That said, such reports should be taken with a pinch of salt, not least because the question of how to describe the linguistic practice in the Congress was, more often than not, a matter of perspective. The German speakers, German readers, and other participants in the Congress, German was a political object through which they tackled various ideological tensions, old and new ones. By speaking or not speaking German, early Zionists were indeed weighing on a perennial question which had its fraught meanings in Jewish history. Was ist Deutsch? Thank you.